Let us descend into the darkness to understand the biology of these ancient conquerors. Although they look like ants, they are built on a different blueprint. The most terrifying aspect of their existence is that almost all of them are completely blind workers and soldiers, live their entire lives in eternal darkness, guided not by sight, but by a sophisticated language, chemicals and vibrations they smell the world through beaded. ANTNNAE that act as noses and fingers detecting the SLIGHTESD shift in air currents, OR the scent an intruder. Their bodies are encased in a thin cuticle which makes them vulnerable to the sun, and dry air dehydration is their greatest enemy. So they must live under strict water discipline, constructing sealed earthen tunnels to move across the surface like a submarine moving through enemy waters. But the cycle life begins with a dramatic event known as the swarm. On a warm, humid night, after the rains, the ground cracks open, and winged males and females known as ALATES emerge in the millions. This is the only time they will ever see the sky. They take flight in a desperate search for a mate, guided by pheromones, each seeking a partner from a different family to ensure genetic diversity. Once they land, the romance ends, and the survival begins. They shed their wings, breaking them off at a pre-designed fracture point. There is no going back now. Flightless and vulnerable, the new king and queen must run a gauntlet of predators to find a crack in the soil or a hollow under a stone. They dig themselves in, sealing the entrance behind them, trapping themselves in a tiny dark chamber. Forever, unlike ants, where the male dies after mating, the termite king is a lifelong partner. He stays by the queen's side, grooming her, feeding her and guarding the eggs. This is a marriage, till death do them part. In this claustrophobic apartment, the colony begins in poverty and silence stage. One is a time of austerity. The queen is small, laying only a few eggs a day. The king acts as midwife and nurse. But the first generation of workers hatches. The power dynamic shifts. The children take over the labor, cleaning the eggs, feeding the parents, and expanding the nest. The larvae are taken to special NURSERIES, kept at a constant 85 degrees Fahrenheit, where worker NANNIES turn them and scrub them with antiseptic saliva to prevent mold. The colony grows. Enters a phase of explosive industrial expansion. The queen's body begins to change in a way that belongs in a body horror movie. She eats voraciously, her ovaries swelling, until her abdomen STRETCHES into a massive pulsating cylinder. She becomes a living incubator, unable to move, producing thousands upon thousands of eggs every single day for decades. She is the beating heart of a biological factory that will eventually number in the millions. Inside this underground city, a complex social engineering project is taking place. Every termite larva is born equal, a blank slate waiting to be assigned a destiny. It is not genetics, but diet that determines their fate. The workers control the population by feeding the young specific chemical cocktails. The colony needs laborers. The larvae are fed a diet high in fiber and low in protein, keeping their hormone levels low and turning them into small, efficient workers. But the colony is under attack. The diet changes. The larvae are gorged on protein-rich food, spiking their juvenile hormones and triggering a monstrous transformation. Their jaws grow massive, their heads become armored, and they morph into soldiers, biological tanks bred solely for war. Meanwhile, the reproductive nymphs are fed the richest lipid-heavy diet, preparing them to become the next generation of kings and queens. How do they sustain this massive population? On a diet of wood, which is digestible stone. Here lies the secret of their success, and the most revolting aspect of their existence. Termites have outsourced their digestion in the guts. Lower termites live ancient flagellate single celled organisms that break down cellulose, but these microbes are lost every time a termite molts, so to survive they must resequire them from their nest mates. Feeding is a relay race. Vomit and feces. Workers chew the wood, partially digest and then regurgitate into the mouths of soldiers and larvae. This process, called TROPHALLAXIS, is how nutrients and chemical signals spread. But IT gets DARKER. They also engage in PROCTDEAL TROPHALLAXIS, which is a polite scientific way of saying they drink fluids from the anus of other termites. IT sounds horrific to us, but IT is essential for their survival, allowing them to share the critical gut bacteria needed to digest wood. Nothing is wasted in the colony. In times of famine, they will cannibalize the eggs and the weakest larvae, recycling their protein to keep the queen alive. Among the higher termites, the TERMITIDAE family, they have taken civilization a step further. They have invented farming deep within the mound in climate-controlled chambers. They build complex gardens, not flowers, But OF fungus workers chew up grass and leaves, creating a compost bed seeded with spores OF the Termites fungus. This fungus acts as an external stomach, breaking down the tough plant matter and converting it into protein-rich nodules. The termites tend these gardens with the skill OF master agronomists, weeding out parasites, controlling humidity, and harvesting the crop to feed the colony. This symbiosis is so perfect that neither the termite nor the fungus can survive without the other. It is an agricultural machine that has been running without pause for millions of years, turning the dry wastelands of Africa and Asia into fertile oases. But do not mistake their sophistication for peace. The world of the termite is a theater of constant brutal warfare. You are small, soft, and nutritious. Everyone wants to eat you. Pangolins rip open their walls. Anteaters consume tens of thousands in a single night. And aardwolves graze on them until dawn. Yet their greatest enemy is not a giant mammal, but a fellow insect, the ant. For millions of years, ants. Termites have been locked in an evolutionary arms race that makes human wars look tame. Ants launch calculated raids, seeking to breach the mound and steal the brood for protein when the alarm is raised. Soldiers bang their heads against the walls, sending vibrations racing through the tunnels like an air raid. Siren the workers rush to seal the breaches with mud, while the soldiers form phalanxes at the choke points. These are suicide missions. Soldiers cannot feed themselves, and once they lock shields or plug a hole with their heads, they often die there, sacrificing themselves for the city. Some species have evolved chemical weapons. NASUTE termite soldiers have no jaws. Instead, their heads are shaped like nozzles, guns that spray a sticky toxic glue that entangles ants and suffocates them. But the most shocking defense comes from the old workers of neocypritermes. TARACUA in French Guiana. When these aging workers become too weak to forage, they become living bombs. They accumulate toxic blue crystals in pouches on their backs. When an ant attacks, the worker ruptures its own body, mixing the crystals with saliva to create a volatile explosion of blue poison gluing. The enemy, and killing the suicide bomber instantly. It is the ultimate sacrifice, the elderly protecting the future. But the war is not just physical. It is biological. Termites live in fear of fungal pathogens like metarhizium, which can turn a termite into a spore-covered mummy in days. To combat this, they have developed social immunity, constantly licking each other to remove spores, and immediately burying or eating the infected to stop the spread. It is a non-stop battle against extinction. Yet through all this chaos stands their greatest achievement, the mound itself. This is not just a pile of dirt. It is a respiring machine, a system of chimneys and ventilation shafts that uses the laws of physics to circulate air, cooling the nest in the blistering heat and retaining warmth in the cold. Some Australian termites build magnetic mounds aligned perfectly north to south to minimize solar exposure. At noon, a feat of engineering achieved without COMPASSESOR math. These structures aerate the soil, making the land around them fertile, allowing grass and trees to thrive in deserts. The termite is a geological force, a master architect, and a survivor of epochs. Humans may think we rule the earth, but underneath our feet in the darkness, the trillions of citizens of the termite empire continue their endless work, building cities that will stand long after ours have crumbled into dust. But the story of the termite empire does not end with war and architecture. There are secrets hidden deep within the mound that reveal an even more complex reality. Imagine a city where aliens walk unnoticed among the citizens. This is the reality of the termite nest. It is home to termitophiles, a guild of imposters and freeloaders. Beetles, mites, and tiny roaches have infiltrated the sanctum. They have evolved to mimic the chemical signature of the colony, passing the security scans of the blind sentinels. Some of these guests are tolerated scrubbing the floors and eating waste like janitors. But others are spies, tricking the workers into feeding them regurgitated food while giving nothing in return. It is a biological cold war fought not with guns, but with pheromones and deceit. And then there is the matter of immortality. While the king and queen live for decades, their legacy can be eternal in a twist that defies the rules of biology. Some queens have unlocked the secret of cloning through asexual succession. A queen can produce daughters that are genetic copies of herself. These princesses do not need a new king. They stay in the nest mating with their own father to continue the bloodline. When the original queen dies, her clone takes the throne, ensuring the royal genetics never fade. It is a dynasty that can theoretically last forever, a lineage unbroken by time. But the influence of termites reaches far beyond the walls of their citadels. They are GOENGINEERS. On a planetary scale, AS they dig, and build they transform the landscape. The ground around a termite mound is rich in nutrients and moisture, creating green islands. OF fertility in the middle. OF dry SAVANNAS grass grows. THICKER trees grow. TALLER, and entire ecosystems flourish in the shadow. OF their towers, they are the secret gardeners. OF the tropics, sustaining life in the HARSHESD environments. Yet there is a DARKER side to their industry. AS they digest the world's wood. They release massive amounts. OF methane, a potent greenhouse gas, contributing up to 3%. OF global emissions, they are quietly shaping the climate. OF the planet with every breath. Ultimately, when we look at the termite, we are looking at a mirror image. OF ourselves, a civilization that rose from the dirt to conquer the world through cooperation, agriculture, and engineering. But unlike US, they have survived for 100 million years. They have weathered asteroids, ICE ages, and continental drift. They do not fear the future because they have mastered art. OF survival, so the next time you see a crumbling log, OR, a mound, OF dirt, remember you are not looking at a pest, you are looking at the masters. OF the earth. And long after humanity has left this planet, OR, faded into history, the silent blind armies, OF the termite, will still be here marching in the darkness, building their eternal cities in the dust. OF, our forgotten world. And yet the most chilling chapter. OF. This saga is the war that is happening right now, not in the jungles. OF Brazil, but in the foundations. OF, our own cities. Humanity has unwittingly become the greatest ally. OF the termite empire. We have built a world made. OF their food. We cut down forests and erect timber-framed houses, creating endless buffets for the blind hordes through global trade. We have acted as their transport ships, carrying them across oceans, hidden inside pallets. Furniture and potted plant species that once lived isolated lives in the tropics are now conquering the suburbs. OF New Orleans, Paris, and Sydney. The invasive species do not just eat dead wood, they devour history. They eat books, archives, and the beams. OF ancient temples, turning our cultural heritage into dust and methane. We fight back with chemical barriers and poisons, pouring billions OF dollars into an asymmetric war. But the termite is a master. OF adaptation. When we block one path, they dig another. When we poison the soldiers, the queen simply increases egg production, replacing the fallen with thousands. OF new recruits. IT is a war. OF attrition and biology is on their side. Consider the paradox. OF their existence. We humans pride ourselves on our individuality, our consciousness, and our ego. But a single termite is nothing, a brainless speck that dies in hours. IF left alone, yet together they form a SUPERORGANISM, a hive mind that possesses an intelligence far greater than the sum. OF its PARTS. This swarm intelligence solves complex problems. OF fluid dynamics and logistics without a single blueprint. OR engineer. IT is a biological algorithm optimized over eons. While human societies fracture and argue, the termite colony moves with a singular terrifying purpose: survival, growth, and expansion. There is no dissent in the mound, no politics, only the relentless drive. OF the genetic imperative. Perhaps this is why they unsettle US so deeply. They represent a form. OF life, where the individual does not matter, where self-sacrifice is not heroism, but a standard operating procedure, and where the collective is immortal. When the asteroid smashed into the Yucatan Peninsula 66 million years ago, the sky turned black, and the plants died. The mighty TYRANNOSAURS starved and froze. But the termites in their underground bunkers survived on dead wood and fungi. They are the ultimate survivalists. OF the natural world, waiting out the apocalypse in their temperature-controlled fortresses. So we scan the stars for signs. OF alien intelligence. We should look down at the dirt beneath our feet. We are already sharing our planet with an alien civilization, one that does not need eyes to see OR words to speak, one that has mastered sustainability and architecture long before we invented the wheel, and one that will likely be here long after our skyscrapers have turned to rust, and our great cities have been reclaimed. BY the jungle, to be digested slowly. Peace, BY peace. BY the true inheritors. OF the earth. Listen closely to the walls. OF your home at night. You might hear nothing, but that silence is a deception deep inside the timber frames, and the floorboards. An army is at work. While you sleep, they eat the very structure that protects you. To a termite, your house is nothing more than a dead giant tree waiting to be harvested. They do not see property deeds or architectural beauty. They see cellulose. They enter through cracks thinner than a credit card, building mud tubes to cross concrete foundations, like engineers constructing bridges across a chasm. Once inside, they work 24 hours a day, without sleep, without breaks, without mercy. BY the time you notice the bubbling paint. OR the hollow sound. OF the wood. IT is already too late. The colony has already digested the skeleton. OF your sanctuary. This is the silent invasion that costs humanity billions of dollars every year, but IT is not. Just destruction. IT is a masterclass in logistics. Imagine coordinating a million blind workers. Without a single radio OR leader shouting orders, how do they do IT? They possess a biological internet, a network of chemical signals that is faster and more efficient than any corporate flowchart. Every touch, every vibration, every scent trail is a packet of data uploaded to the hive mind. If a worker finds food, IT leaves a chemical. BREADCRUMB trail. If a soldier senses danger, IT bangs its head to send a MORSC code. Terror through the walls. The colony reacts instantly, moving like a single fluid entity. This collective consciousness strips away the weakness of individuality. There is no hesitation, no fear, no debate. There is only the mission. And the mission is to consume, grow, and survive in a world obsessed with the self. The termite reminds us. The terrifying power. The many, they have no names, they have no faces. But together they can eat cities. They are the ultimate socialist. Nature. Sharing guts, sharing food, sharing germs, and sharing fate. We look to the future and worry about AI taking over. We forget that a superintelligence has been here all along. IT does not live in servers. IT lives in the dirt. IT does not need electricity. IT runs on wood and water. IT has spent the last 100 million years perfecting the art of survival. While we argue over borders and resources, the termite empire quietly expands beneath our feet, undeterred, unstoppable, and eternal. So the next time you see a winged insect land on your windowsill, do not just SWAT IT away. Look at IT with respect and fear, for you are looking at a scout the most successful civilization Earth has ever known. And they are patiently waiting for our reign to end, so they can reclaim the world that was always theirs. In the end, the termite teaches us a humbling lesson about legacy. We build statues of bronze and stone, hoping to be remembered forever. But bronze corrodes and stone cracks under the weight of time. The termite builds with mud and spit. Yet its legacy is written in the DNA. The biosphere itself. Consider the Brazilian mounds again, those vast fields, earthen cones visible from space. A geological feature created by insects that has outlasted human empires. If we were to disappear tomorrow, nature would begin. The great reclamation vines would choke our highways, roots would crack our concrete foundations. But the vanguard this destruction would be the termite. They are the recyclers God's creation, breaking down the old to make way for the new. Without them, the forests would choke on their own dead. The cycle nutrients would stall, and the planet would suffocate under layers UNDCAYED timber. They are not villains in this story. They are the custodians life. They ensure that death is not the end, but a new beginning. A fallen giant sequoia becomes a nursery, a ROTTING roof becomes a colony, and a crumbling civilization becomes a feast. So when you walk through a forest and hear the snap a twig, know that you are walking on the roof a billion souls. They are down there right now, navigating dark tunnels, caring for their blind babies, fighting off monstrous ants, and tending to their fungal gardens with a dedication that shames human effort. They do not ask for recognition. They do not seek fame. They only seek to continue the line, to keep the biological flame burning in the cold, dark void. The universe. This is the majesty the termite, a creature so small yet so significant that if IT were removed, the world we know. IT would collapse. The irony is palpable. We poison them. We curse them. We call exterminators to wipe them out. Yet we cannot live without them. They turn the soil, they release the carbon, they drive the engine the tropics. They are the unsung heroes the carbon cycle, the silent partners in the dance life. And we stand on the precipice climate change and ecological collapse. Perhaps we should look to them not as pests, but as teachers. They have solved the problems sustainable cities. They have mastered efficient farming. They have achieved zero waste societies. While we drown in our own garbage, the termite turns waste into life. So let us bow our heads to the true kings, the underground, for they shall inherit the earth long after we have returned to the dust from which we came. And in that final silence, the only sound remaining will be the soft, rhythmic chewing a billion tiny jaws reclaiming the world one bite at a time.